Hello everybody, we're just getting ready to do Diane's presentation, looking at some of the other research projects and the history of museums around the world, and it gives you a bit of a taste as to what can be done here. Some of the amazing graphics, some of the amazing 3D models and so on and so forth. Now, John mentioned earlier about the cost of some of these things, and yes, these things cost an enormous amount to run a museum, to run a building, and to want to really make a facility like this. And John has already mentioned today as well that, for the time being anyway, most of our support is coming in internationally, as in from Australia, from the main site, right, from the main team. Well, we do have a trust here in the UK, which is committed to supporting the work of the museums and stuff like that. And we've got some of our trustees here today. But David, could you just tell us about these forms, a bit about your involvement in the trust and how people can support the museum by supporting the trust?
Yeah, thank you. I think they're fairly self-evident. You'll see if you look at the form, there is a place there for you to gift aid donations. That means if you have, if you're paying the tax in Britain, we are able to recover the tax. The tax has been taken from it. Standing order part of it as well, and that's about it. It's fairly straightforward. As a trust, we've been running since 2004, so we're 19 years old now. So it's been going for some time now. We are completely voluntary. There's four trustees. There's another one over there. Wave your hand. There's two others, not here today, and we're all volunteers, so we take nothing out of the trust at all. We don't charge for travel expenses, although we're scattered all around the country. So what you donate to Creation Research Trust goes almost entirely to the mission, to the ministry. The only minuses are the bank charges and the charges for the auditor, which is a couple £100 a year. So virtually everything that you donate will come to support and underwrite this work here. And it would be greatly appreciated if you'd like to contribute in that way. Anything else?
That's great. Thank you very much, David. So yeah, we had a big meeting when we were taking this project on, and we were discussing the future of the Creation Research Centre and where it was going to be, and the trust has essentially agreed to support the museum project fully. So by supporting the Creation Research Trust, you are effectively running this place, you are supporting the running of this place and keeping it going and developing it further. And also, because all of creation research around the world is connected, like I say, at the moment almost all of our support comes in from overseas. So by supporting one of the officers, no matter where you are in the world, you are supporting all the officers and all the projects that we do. So we would be very grateful if you're able to support and help us to continue the vision that we see here, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But Diane, let's make sure your microphone's on. We need to switch the little box. We need to switch it, it's just on the top. There you go.
Yes, are we on?
We are on.
We are on, isn't that good? Yes, well, I'm going to tell you about a museum that's a little bit different to what this one is, because this is a building. Jurassic Ark is actually an outdoor museum, which makes it quite unusual. In fact, it's certainly unique in Australia. I'm not sure whether it's unique in the world, but that doesn't matter. It's an outdoor museum, and we welcome people to come and see all sorts of things and learn about the God of the real world, just like we welcome people to come and see the evidence of the God of the real world in this museum here. Now, it's called Jurassic Ark because the rock layer that originally started it off with the fossils we found are classified as Jurassic, and we shouldn't be afraid of using that term because it was given originally by someone who believed the Bible, who lived in the Jura Mountains. So Jurassic means just like the Jura Mountains, and the name had nothing to do with millions of years because it was named before that idea came into existence. So Jurassic, to do with the rocks like the Jura Mountains. And the rocks like the Jura Mountains have all sorts of interesting fossils in them. Now, everyone thinks Jurassic means dinosaurs. We do have dinosaurs, like the two that you met downstairs, and they're very, very popular. But the real reason it started was because we found some fossil petrified wood. Now, this was found quite a few years ago, and by the owner of the property that this is on, who are long-term supporters of creation research. We've been very, very grateful for their support, and one of them is there on the left, and you can see John Mackay and a couple of the other regular workers. The man with the camera at the top is one of John's grandsons there, looking at these fossil logs. Now, originally it was just a few bits of petrified wood, and James, who owns the property, rang up John and said, "Oh, we've found some petrified wood. Do you want to come and have a look at it?" Well, John will go anywhere to look at fossils. And so, so we went up there and, oh, this is a good place. We can bring school groups and field trip groups, and they can pick up bits of petrified wood and take them away. And we realised, as we excavated more and more of it, that this is a much bigger thing than just a few bits of petrified wood. And some of the pieces are really enormous. This is Daryl, who looks after the site on a day-to-day basis. He's the curator, as it were, who looks after the site, takes care of the gardens and some of the other things. And this is a huge, enormous tree stump. We have since had a ground-penetrating radar scan done of the area, and there are thousands and thousands of fossil logs buried in this thing. So anyone who goes up there, you can dig up your own fossil. You can't take them away. We don't actually excavate them out. They're quite fragile. They're heavy, but they will crack if they are handled. So we're leaving them in the ground to show people the extent of this. It's like a big log jam. Now, you know the photos of log jams that you see in Canadian rivers where they fell a whole lot of trees and they float down the river and get jammed. It's just like one of those. Now think of the size of a flood you need to bury a log jam of logs that size, but thousands of them all together, masses and masses of them. And so we've been digging these up and we've been photographing. There's somebody underneath that hat photographing them. And this was one of the first ones we ever found. It's a bit weathered and now because it's been out exposed to the weather. It wasn't that sort of grey colour when we found it. But it is interesting in that all of these logs show an enormous amount of fine detail. So you can see what species of tree that they were from. And this particular one was rather good because you can see there's a branch actually forming within where the fossil has broken. And that tells you a lot about identifying trees, if you can find the pattern of tree rings and also how the branches form their angles. And so we sent a piece off to an expert in fossil trees. We thought we knew what they were. They're Araucaria pines, but we wanted that confirmed by someone who was an expert in fossil wood. And yes, they contacted it. Yes, you have fossil Araucaria pines. Now, we have fossil Araucaria pine wood in this museum, but remember, southern pine trees, Araucaria pines, they don't grow in this country now. They don't grow in Germany. When the fossil was found that we have downstairs that's got a piece of an Araucaria branch in it, but they do grow in Australia. In fact, they grow in the very area where all of these Araucaria pines were. So we thought, well, this is a good opportunity for us to make the point about how things have multiplied after their kind. These are classic living fossils. So we decided we would plant a few trees. And so here are Araucaria pine trees growing a few yards away from the fossil Araucarias, and they haven't changed one bit, in spite of the fact that this whole area is classified as Jurassic, so it's over 100 million years old, and they're still the same. And we also thought, well, there are other living fossils as well, like the ginkgo that you would have seen up the back there. Palm trees are living fossils. The Wollemi pine, you may have heard about, was quite famous. They made a big thing about it. It was found in the Blue Mountains in Australia. There is an example planted in Kew Gardens. and they got David Attenborough to plant it so they could give it a lot more publicity and promote it as being an evolutionary example. But of course, it's not. It's multiplied after its kind. It's exactly the same as the ones they found growing in the Blue Mountains. And we have cycads. We were even given some cycads. Now, you will have noticed that we have various things donated to us. So as well as getting support in finances, we do welcome donations of good fossils and other things. And we had cycads donated to us because there was a drought in Australia. And this nursery business couldn't sell their cycads because they're very big and slow growing, and nobody wanted them because they weren't allowed to artificially water plants. And so he rang up and he said, well, I have these cycads that I can't sell. Would you like them? You may have them for free if you can take them away. Well, we had to hire a big truck to take them away because they're huge, but they're worth thousands of dollars. So that was a huge donation. Classic living fossils, they're considered to be about 300 million years old. Haven't changed a bit. So we have our after their kind living fossil garden. And we thought, well, we could tell some more about biblical history and about the Bible by planting gardens. People love gardens. So we started off planting some gardens where it describes, well, in the beginning, God planted a garden and he made the plants and he made fruit trees and low-growing herbs and all sorts of things like that. And so we planted a little garden, and then we've gradually extended it until it's quite long and goes down to where the fossils are from that gate that I showed you the photo of. And we've planted lots of lovely things that show you. I'm sorry, is this... it seemed to be a bit echoey. Is that better? We've planted all sorts of lovely things which show God's beautiful design. Now, because it's in Queensland where you don't have any frosts, you can grow orchids outside. You don't have to have them in a glass house. And you just plant them by plonking them in trees and old tree stumps and things like that. So we have beautiful orchids growing like these. These are called crucifix orchids. They're rather beautiful, aren't they? And they have that distinctive cross shape. And so we thought, well, we can get even more out of this. Why don't we find as many examples of plants that are of the one kind, so that we can show that not only have things multiplied after their kind, but you also have variation within kind. In fact, tremendous variation, but none of that is evolution. I'm sorry. It's fine. Is it? It's all right? It just sounds awfully echoey to me. Is that better? This needs to go closer. Is that better? Yes. Now, John is also fond of a group of plants called bromeliads. Now, one bromeliad you might be familiar with is the pineapple. That's a bromeliad, but there are lots of other bromeliads, and so we gradually gathered together a whole lot of examples of different bromeliads, and this is the bromeliad kind garden. And we're going to have a few other different kind gardens as well. That's being developed. So this was our first variation within kind garden, and it's grown rather beautifully. And you have bromeliads which are this big, and you have some that are that big, and everything in between. And you have red pigmented ones and green ones, and some with long thin leaves and some with short fat ones, but they're all variations of the same kind. So we see lots of change, but none of it's evolution. These are all obviously bromeliads, and they have the same basic structure as bromeliads. So we have, after their kind, living fossils, variation within kind in gardens, and we thought, well, we try and tell the history of the world in gardens, so we just planted a nice garden to show that God, on day 3 of the creation week, he planted a garden. But the story doesn't end there, does it? Gardens changed, didn't they? And we are the only people in the world who have deliberately planted a garden of thorny plants. Most people do their best to ignore those, but we want to make a point. And so, and the point we want to make is that God did not have to add anything to plants in order to make thorns. In fact, they are a degeneration. So here are some bromeliads in the thorn garden, but some of them have spikes on them and some of them don't. In order to have those sort of spiny leaves, all that has to happen is that you have a mismatch between the internal plumbing, the leaf veins, and these leaves do have veins. They're not as obvious as they are in other leaves, but they're there. The leaf veins have hard stuff in their in the structure of the leaf veins themselves. That acts as a support for the leaf. So if you have a mismatch between the soft green tissue and the leaf veins will end up sticking out the edges and they will form hard points, and so you've got spines. The same with thorns like you get on a lemon tree or a hawthorn. They happen when branches and leaf bases start to grow and then they just stop. So nothing's been added to the thorny plant. In fact, it's lost something. It's a failure of growth. So thorns and spines are just disturbances of growth, and so you can get thorny and non-thorny varieties in lots of plants. And we have a little mural there which explains that. We have these outdoor murals because we found that people don't really know their biblical history. In fact, when we planted that first garden, which was just meant to illustrate day 3 of creation, someone did ask us, well, do you have any gardens for days 1 and 2? Yes, bit of a problem, isn't it? So we thought, well, maybe we need to explain to people the days of creation, because the church doesn't teach it these days. They just ignore the whole thing. So we got the artist who works with us, who has illustrated those beautiful children's books that you will have seen downstairs. We got him to design a mural showing the 6 days, or the first 5 days of creation. Actually, we don't go quite up to the 6th day here. Now, you do have to look at this from right to left because of the place where it's placed in the garden. You come to the right-hand edge of it first before the left-hand. So if you start that end, and when we were explaining to Steve what we wanted, he read through the first 5 days and he said, well, I'm not quite sure about the one where it says it was without form and void. That's a bit hard for an artist to draw. But anyway, he's done a lovely job of showing the creation of the heavens, the earth, the light, the land and sea, the vegetation, and then the sea creatures and the flying creatures. And the sea creatures and the flying creatures, would have been wonderful to be there on those days and see things that God had created. And is Snow still here? And I think he's downstairs. Well, he is a brilliant wildlife artist, and he drew us this beautiful mural. It's absolutely stunning. This photo doesn't do it justice. It really is a beautiful mural of the creatures that live in the sea and the creatures that fly in the air. Now notice he's also got some pterosaurs and some plesiosaurs in there. In other words, things that don't exist now, but they would have been created along with the flying things and the swimming things on the 5th day of creation. Now once we started with these murals, we thought, well, we can extend that and tell the biblical history of the world. So, of course, we start with Adam and Eve in the garden when the world was very good. And so this is another one of Steve's pictures showing the world was very good. And notice there are dinosaurs there because they would have been created on the same time as the land animals were created on the 6th creation day. And Adam and Eve would have had no problem with having a few dinosaurs wandering through the Garden of Eden because they wouldn't have done anyone any harm. Everything was very good. Sadly, the world did not stay that way, and eventually it became corrupt, and God sent the flood. So a lot of the fossils that we have there actually illustrate the fact that the world has been deluged. It has been buried by a flood. And so we need to be able to tell that story, and the murals help us to do that and to remind people that everyone who was outside the ark didn't survive, just in the same way that everyone who doesn't put their faith in the Lord Jesus Christ won't survive the next worldwide judgment. Now, because these are all outdoors, they are actually printed on aluminium and made fairly weatherproof, but we do have them set up in frames with fold-down coverings of shade cloth, so when people aren't there visiting, those are all actually folded down so that they are protected a bit from the weather. Now, modern visualization we have gone into the digital world, and some other people we know who are experts in computer graphics said, well, we can set up a system for you where you can get some computer graphics on your phone using this system we've got, using a little app that you can download onto your phone. And you can take a photo of a visualized whatever it is you like. So in our case, it was dinosaurs, and that will be combined with the photo that you take on your phone. And so that's been a great hit. You can have your photo taken with a graphic dinosaur. This is the photo you get on your phone, right? The school students are real. The mural in the background is real. The dinosaur there is a computer graphic, but it does make for a good photo, and people enjoy that. And so we have extended that to a few other places. Another good photo opportunity we have is this, right? Do you recognize that? Right, it's a shark's jaw. It is a really, really huge, huge shark. It's a great photo opportunity. Lots of people get their photo taken with it. But we also have a computer graphic that goes with that, because people have no idea how big this shark was. This is a megalodon shark, grew up to about 20 meters long. That is bigger than the biggest great white that lives today. And so the computer graphic people did design a graphic for it. And we had some fun working out where we might get people to aim their cameras when they took a photo of this, and this was one of our experiments. That's John's estate car underneath there. And it's quite a big vehicle, so this is a seriously big shark. But we now have another way of explaining about giant creatures without the need for computer graphics, so it doesn't matter if your phone signal won't work. This is a giant goanna. A goanna is a large Australian lizard, and they are much smaller than this, but in the past we know from their fossils they grew to be much bigger. And this is a mural made of the same printed aluminium as the rectangular murals, but it's very, very cleverly printed so that it does have that 3D look about it, but it is flat. And it's another wonderful photo opportunity. But it's not just for photo opportunities. We are trying to show people, look, the world used to be a better place. The fact that creatures are no longer this big should tell you that somehow in the past, the world was a much better place, and that reptiles that just couldn't survive in the harsh Australian climate could survive in those days. The world was a better place. So big creatures, megafauna, not just dinosaurs, but big other creatures, are a good example of how the world is going downhill. Again, lots of change, but no evolution. And it's good for people to be able to see that and experience it, even if it is just with a flat piece of printed aluminium. It makes it very memorable if people can actually do it, hold it, see it for themselves, which is why it's important that we do have a museum that people can come to rather than just seeing things online. We were grateful for the online things that we could do during the restrictions, but we really like to have people to come and see Jurassic Ark, and we have open days at Jurassic Ark, just like we have open days here. And this was from one of our open days, and you can see a whole lot of people looking at one of our experiments. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But down in the bottom right-hand corner is a fabulous fossil that was given to us by this bearded gentleman here, and you can see it being mounted in the there. It was interesting. This is a fossil that was donated to us by Joe Taylor, who lives in Texas, and it was actually cheaper for Joe Taylor to fly with this thing in its package as part of his luggage than for it to be sent by courier. So I had to go and meet him at Sydney Airport and then fly to Brisbane with him. But it was really good to meet Joe Taylor. He is a real character, a wonderful supporter of our work, and a brilliant fossil collection and a collector, and a brilliant artist who actually mounts and displays these fossils. So we're very, very grateful to have him, and here he is speaking at the open day. This is a cast of that same fossil that's actually inside, that they were mounting inside there. The funniest thing I remember from that open day was people were allowed to ask questions, and someone asked a question about apes turning into people, which I answered. And then Joe said, "Oh, look, can I make a few points?" And so I gave him the microphone. And he said, "You have to realize that apes are smarter than people, and they would not evolve into people, because if you can live in a tree and eat fruit for nothing and just loaf around all day, you're not going to evolve into people who have to be ruled by governments and pay tax." He comes from Texas. He's a wild man of the woods, and so you can imagine what he thinks of bureaucracy and governments and paying tax. But a lovely man and a great benefactor to creation research. And we like to show people the gardens. We like to show them the brilliant design. We like to show them the evidence for creation and for degeneration. This is a homeschooling family. We love to help homeschoolers. We like to have homeschool groups come to Jurassic Ark. And so if you are involved in homeschooling, we'd really love to help you in whatever way we can. And these family are looking at one of our really strange plants. We like weird plants. We love weird plants because they are some of the best examples of God's brilliant design, and also the fact that God has a sense of humour. Everyone thinks that God is a sort of doer-grump. No, he's not. God has a wonderful sense of humour. Why else would he create a plant that has flowers on its roots? Which it does, right? Yeah, it's a type of orchid. It grows in South America, but it will also grow in Queensland. So we like to cultivate these and show them to people. And the other thing we like to do is we like to do experiments. Now, here's a simple experiment that you can actually do yourself, and we do this regularly when the visitors come. This is just to illustrate how you can form polystrate trees. So it's just a big tank full of water, and you put some sticks in it and just leave them there, right? Very easy to do. And eventually the sticks start absorbing the water because they're made out of wood, and inside of wood you've got lots of microscopic channels, and they are designed to make water flow in one direction. After all, that's how the tree gets the water up to its leaves out of the soil. And that still works even when the tree is dead because of the way it's been designed. And so if you leave them there, you can see that some of them have started to sink, and they become more and more oblique, and eventually they stand on their ends because the end that absorbs the water gets heavier first, and it will start to sink. And so here we can explain to people how you can form polystrate trees. And John Mackay has been all over the world and found lots of examples of these. And so we have a mural that explains these as well. Now, we do some other interesting experiments. We're very keen on looking at examples of rapid processes. So rapid processes for finding polystrate, for explaining polystrate trees. This is one that's of personal interest to John Mackay because he used to work in the coal industry and used to teach mining students about coal, and has done a lot of research into it, about how buried plants get carbonized. And so we did all sorts of experiments, and it seems the key to it is clay. It forms a sort of catalyst to make buried plants carbonize. So we've buried plants in all sorts of different containers, all sorts of different plants with different clays, and we've eventually formed some black stuff. Well, how do you know that it's coal? Well, we thought, well, that's easy. You just burn some and see if it smells like a coal fire, because we're all old enough to know what a coal fire smells like. and we always let people know what we're doing and ask for comments. And some of the comments that came back is, well, you know, are you sure you've got a proper chemical test for coal? Just doing this sort of thing isn't good enough. So anyway, John contacted a chemist that he knows and said, what is the best chemical test for for seeing whether you have coal? And he wrote back and he said, well, what you do is you get a piece and you burn it and see if it smells like coal, a coal fire. So also, there's all sorts of research you can do on your own, and it works. Now, the other thing that we're well known for doing is our stalactite research. So this is our first stalactite maker. Now, all it is a big cement pipe that's been cut in half longitudinally, and we filled it up with seashells, which are a natural source of lime, and mulch, just mulch from the ground. So that will have lots of microbes and organic matter in it. And we drilled holes and put pieces of cord and then just watered it and let it drip. And sure enough, we formed these beautiful stalactites that you can see. The colour is from some of the pigments that are already in the ground there. And these all formed within months. So forget hundreds of thousands of years, right? Months will do. Now, they're not very big, but then compared to the size of the average limestone cave, we don't have much in the way there, but it's enough to make the point. Stalactite formation is not a slow, gradual crystallization process that only relies on the chemistry of calcium carbonate dissolving in water, because it's fairly insoluble. Somehow the organic matter, the microbial action, does make a difference. And secular scientists are catching up to us. There is now a whole scientific study of the microbiomes of limestone caves. So stand your ground on the biblical truth. The Bible doesn't change. Eventually the secular scientists will catch up to us. Now, when we decided we'd set up another one of these, we were going to set up the same sort of device, but then Joseph told us a good story about how he found stalactites in man-made structures, in various bridges and things like that, and leaves were being fossilized in these man-made structures. So they certainly weren't millions of years old. And in fact, being outside, well, leaves and rubbish get blown around. So we thought, well, we might emulate that. So we modified the structure a bit, and that long orange structure there is just a channel where it drips into that, and we've put leaves into it, but they blew away. But then other ones blew in. And they got stuck. And then they gradually got fossilized as this calcium carbonate structure, chemicals just stuck to the leaves, stuck to that pipeline there, all in a matter of months. So within that channel, we have fossilized leaves, and right down the bottom there, you can see we're starting to grow a little bit of a stalagmite. Right? And again, leaves just blew into that, and they got stuck, and they got fossilized. So forget about long times, forget about slow processes, right? In fact, rapid processes are what rule. It's not time that makes structures form. It's whether you've got the right conditions, the right chemical and physical processes. And of course, the other thing that we're well known for are our strata experiments. Now, these started in John's in his front garden where he's got an overhanging area with a freestanding concrete hard standing. And so we set up this device, which was built for us by a local builder. And it does involve a lot of mud and a lot of water, and so we didn't tend to do it during the day because it wasn't terribly conducive to people coming in and out of the office or anything to have all of this mud and water all over the place. But eventually we moved the experiment up to Jurassic Ark. So here is, we've been through goodness knows how many prototypes. I think we might be about that, up to about number 12 by now. And you might recognize the character on the right there who was helping us put this together. The other fellow there is Clem Grieger, who is a genuine rocket scientist. I'm not joking. He is an engineer. He is really brilliant. He's got all sorts of strange ideas, but he really is brilliant, and he helped us a lot in developing these experiments.
I've spent 3 hours in the car with you talking about form of energy.
Yes, that's the sort of thing you get to talk to with Clem. And, but anyway, as we've gradually worked on these experiments now, I mean, look at this. You've got mud, you've got water, you've got machinery. I mean, this is bloke's heaven, isn't it? Yes, we've. This is our current. This is the current state of the device. Clem has designed a very, very clever pump mechanism which makes the water and sediment flow through this, and you can see even from that photo there, we're starting to form some really interesting strata patterns there. Now, recording this and getting it out onto our website has been difficult simply because it is an outdoor thing, and photographing things through perspex is rather a challenge. And so we haven't really fossilized John's car there, but that is one of the challenges of actually writing up scientific research. Sometimes it can be a simple thing like finding your way around how to deflect reflections. But as you can see, in this device, we're getting all sorts of really interesting rock formations, which the evolutionists tell us take millions of years to form one by one, one thing on top of the other, whereas every time we do this experiment, we literally see them growing sideways within minutes. And you've seen this many times, Joseph, and hopefully you'll be able to come and see it again and visit Australia. This is an interesting experiment that we've been trying now. The Bible tells us that in Noah's flood, the water came from the fountains of the great deep, as well as from the water that came down from the sky. So we tried actually shooting up, spurting up fountains of the great deep. Now, they were only very, very tiny compared, but so they were hardly a great deep. But anyway, we were simulating the effect of having water coming up through the sediment. And we're getting some very interesting effects now, which conventional geology tells us, well, things got laid down and then they got shifted and moved and there were fault lines and all of this took such a long time. No, there it is happening before our eyes in minutes. And this is another experiment about rapid processes as well. We wanted to teach students how to go looking for buried things. Now, you don't just go and randomly dig holes in the ground. You have to go poking and prodding to see if there's anything that's worth burying or digging up. So we buried a whole lot of bones. They were given to us by local farmers and hunters, so they were just animal bones, and they were bleached white, just dried out bones, and we buried them. But we found that it was very interesting when they were dug up. They were left in this was just like a big sand pit actually on the ground with wooden surrounds. And it was just watered by the rain. We didn't water it, so any water that was in there came up from the ground or from the rain. When they dug them up, they turned brown. And each time they dug them up, after months and months, they got darker and darker. So that shows you the original bones and the coloured ones. We did send some of them to a lab in Sydney, and And they said that, yes, you now have iron in these bones because we noticed they were heavy. There's iron minerals in the ground there. Sadly, the man who owns that laboratory has gone to be with the Lord. So we need to find somebody else who can do chemical analysis for us. But we know that we have iron in these bones. Now, again, we started this experiment in 2014. So the oldest these bones could be is 8 years old. So forget millions of years to mineralize a bone. 8 years in a sand pit is enough. And you can read about this experiment in the newest edition of our Tights and Mites book, Tights, Mites and Fossil Fights, new edition coming out. Hopefully we'll have it printed soon in the UK. That's one of the new editions in that book, and you can read about those experiments. So I do hope if you ever visit Australia, you can come to Jurassic Ark and you can come and enjoy the gardens. But most of all, we want you to see the Lord's work in the real world. This is not just about creation versus evolution. This is about showing the Lord's handiwork in the world. So we do hope that you can come and enjoy with us and praise the Lord. How manifold are your works. See the many works of the Lord. You can see them all around you now in this museum and downstairs and in all of the other places where creation research is at work. And you might see, we hope that you will see the wisdom that God has made them all. The earth is full of your creatures, or full of the creation. And we hope that you will enjoy seeing that in this museum and enjoy seeing that in any other places where creation research is involved. And thank you for coming today. And we hope you've enjoyed your time here. And Joseph has some more to tell us about what's happening with this place.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's time for a break before we do the last session. Go and grab some more drinks and stuff like that. But before we do that, a couple of quick things. And before we do the couple of quick things, does anybody have any questions for Diane about what she's presented or the kind of work or the research? And a lot of these things we're hoping to duplicate, because duplication is good. It shows that you got it right the first time. So we're hoping to duplicate some of these experiments and stuff here because they are very visual. And we're praying that we can actually go out and develop more of these projects here in the research area downstairs, which hopefully was pointed out to you earlier when you did downstairs section. So there's plenty of stuff going on, plenty of stuff to work on. Does anybody have any questions for Diane?
So just to check, what does petrified mean? You said you found it like petrified wood.
Petrified wood. Well, petrified means turned to stone, basically, right, or rock. So it's wood that now looks like a rock. It is still wood, but it's now full of minerals, so it is effectively a rock. Peter, the rock, right? So the rocks, the logs have been petrified, right, or petrified. Okay, so it's fossil wood. Yeah.
And it's different to what we were talking about earlier with the dinosaur bones, which is permineralised. So permineralised does not mean turned to stone, it means permeated with minerals, right? That's literally permeated, like permineralised. So minerals have entered the bone. That's what's been going on with those deer bones and butchered bones in the sand pit, right? It's permineralisation. The bone is still there. It's just been infilled, all the porous part has been infilled and entrapped in minerals, whether that minerals is sand or clay or mud or iron. And what's interesting is, we've got some for sale downstairs in the shop actually, we've got examples of them over here, of the sort of North Sea bones, which the main petrifying element of it is iron, that's why they're dark. And I've collected many of these North Sea bones, horse, bison, so on and so forth, up and down the Norfolk coast. I could not tell any difference between the bones that were dug up out of the sand pit and the bones, the fossil ones that you get washed up on the North Sea coast, right? That's just my experience. You go and check it and you do the tests and the iron and stuff, and you find there's no difference at all in the amount of iron and stuff that are in these bones. So, any other questions for Diane?
Actually, it comes from that. I know that certain seals, like grey seals, common seals, from the Thames estuary, turn orange and brown because of the minerals, the ions, etc., in the mud.
Yeah.
How permanent is that?
I know because I have some. We also have lots of stuff comes out of the Thames estuary, including like butchered bones. So medieval bones that have been butchered and turfed into, into the Thames, right? And you'll find that they have the same thing happen to them. Again, they're identical to these North Sea bones. They take on iron, they take on the browns and the staining from the mud that they're buried in, right? They are, for all the use of the word, they are fossils, right? They're preserved in minerals. It's a permanent state. You can't give it a wash and clean it out. It is a permanent state. It is a permanent mineralisation, right? If they were washed up on the North Sea, like we got one of our trustees, Marvin, actually donated, and I've got it downstairs in our archive. It was a sheep jawbone, right? Now, if that had been picked up on, say, West London or the Norfolk coast, you would not be able to tell the difference between that and any other of the fossils that come out of the peat beds there, right? They're identical. And to be honest, they're buried in the same way, they're preserved in the same kind of mineral. It's just happened much, much quicker than it's supposed to be, right? We reminded people up here, if you came around up here early, that a fossil is only regarded a fossil if it's older than 10,000 years. And the only conclusion you can come as to why that is because if a fossil is older than 10,000 years, you can't trust survival, full stop. Right? So that's why they promote them as older than 10,000 years. But whether you're dealing with a petrified or permineralised, technically, teddy bear, or whether you're dealing with a permineralised dinosaur bone, it's exactly the same process. Final question for Diane? I know I've spent most of the time talking, but... Yes.
I'm sorry to be a bit deep, but then can you say exactly what a fossil is then? If it's a flood fossil, what is that difference between the mineralisation, or is that?
Well, a fossil is literally just something that you have found in a hole. The word "foss" is used in other parts of science. In fact, it's used in anatomy to describe a hole. So a fossil is just something that has been dug up. Now, in order to be dug up, that means it's been buried, and then there are different processes that can happen to it when it is buried. It can get mineralised, it can get petrified.
Oh, so whether it's petrified or permineralised?
It's still a fossil, that's right, because it's something that has been buried and then has been dug up out of a hole. And it's been preserved in some way, depending on the conditions that it's been buried in.
I think the real question was what's petrifying. Can you explain what petrifying?
So petrifying is turned to stone. So it's of all fossils are preserved, or should be preserved in stone. Some fossils, or things that are regarded as fossils, really are preserved in nothing but frozen mud. So if you look at the mammoth bones, right, they're buried in permafrost. Well, that's just frozen mud, slushy kind of stuff, right? And so they're not even technically preserved in stone. But petrification specifically means turned to stone. So in the case of fossil wood, you've got infill, so it's a type of permineralisation process. It's becoming permeated with minerals, but very little of the original wood is there, if at all, right? Now, you still do find sometimes the original wood, which is permineralised wood. Sometimes it's turned to opal, right? But, and that's very nice if you find opalised wood, but it's actually turned to stone, so it's been replaced. The cow's got a chemical change, and it's been replaced by minerals. That's whatever minerals it's been buried in, right? If you have opal forming, it's opal. If you have iron, it's there. There's lots of silica already in wood, so sometimes the silica is almost completely preserved in silica, and that's when you can polish the wood up really nicely. So petrification is turned to stone. Permineralisation is permeated with minerals. There's lots of other forms of fossilisation, right? Whether it's frozen in a permafrost, whether it's turned to iron pyrite, whether it's been replaced, so on and so forth. Sometimes it's just a cast. So a lot of the ammonites are just casts. The actual shell is sometimes the only thing that remains, and that gets broken down very easily. So you're left with an infill, which is just an infilled cast of the ammonite. So there's lots of different forms of fossilisation. Fossil, in the loosest term, just means being buried, right? Fossil is regarded nowadays as an organism or a creature from the past that has been preserved in stone. And that's basically it. All right, well, a few quick things to mention before we have our break and go and grab our teas and coffees and biscuits, and we'll reconvene back here in a little while. A couple of quick mentions and a couple of quick notes. You'll see that we have some witness T-shirts. You can witness and spread the truth of God's word just by wearing a T-shirt, and these have been proven to be excellent conversation starters. This was a concept which I sort of saw and redesigned and redid a little while, many years back, sent it over to our artist in Australia. John thought it was great. They produced these. We've been trying to get them produced in the UK ever since, and we finally got round to doing it for the open day. And Diane already mentioned that there's a number of books. There's about 3 new kids' books coming out. There's part 2 of the question and answer book. The new version of Titus and Mices are all things we want to get printed very shortly in the UK, but of course we need your support. And I know it's nowhere near Christmas, and we've still got many years before Christmas comes, but I happened to notice just the other day that there was a council worker carrying a large Merry Christmas light to put up in the little. But anyway, with Christmas worryingly close. Last year we produced a limited run of the Christmas books. They never really took off because we weren't doing much proper ministry, so it was only really promoted on Facebook and stuff. But a brand new book from John McCarthy and Friends. It's Zach the Star Boy, the creator who came for Christmas, from the perspective of a young Jewish boy who actually saw the star and wondered what it was all about. So a really, really great sort of comic book style, but with a really, really great message inside and study guide at the back and stuff like that. So if you're looking for Christmas presents, the kids' books are great, and we even have a Christmas book to go specifically with it. In terms of the next section we're going to be doing after the break is looking a little bit more into the future, looking a little bit into what the vision for the Creation Research Centre is, including looking at it as a sort of facility for Christians and non-Christians, but also a way that can aid discipleship, and a bit about what that means. Somebody who I'm really excited to introduce you to is Susie. Come on, see, I know, I saw the eye roll, come on. Susie is actually coming on board to come and help us here at the Creation Research Centre, so from the new year specifically, you'll be here to help us run the open day and run the museum and get the days when we're open, look after the shop and that kind of stuff. So it's a big learning curve for both of us, but do pray for Susie and pray for us and pray for the work that's going on here in the museum as well. But Susie's our newest recruit, so really, really pleased to have you on board. You can go now. Just wanted to introduce you to everyone. All right, let's have a break, have a wander around the museum. I'll be around, Diane will be around, ask some questions. Let's grab a tea or a coffee or a biscuit, and we'll reconvene back up here for the last session. What's the time now? Nearly 3 o'clock. Let's reconvene back up here at about 3:15. So we've got sort of 20 minutes or so.